no kid is on her way, but she told me she texted to say she was running away. So, I don't know if I'll be able to do this hand mic very well. It holds us up to my face. So welcome to the first Sunday monthly service of the North Texas Church of Freethought, obviously December 2nd, 2018. Hopefully you're all in the right place. I recognize you all, so you must be in the right place. So we have for some time begun our service, with a brief explanation of what an atheist church is and does. Maybe I should just skip this part, but it's worth thinking about. Atheist is accurate in the sense that we reject the idea that an actual deity exists and can be manipulated with magic spells or proclamations. I mean, just the idea, I believe, you just say that and you're in, right? It's like the magic password, or praise or other entreaties, really to the creator God of the universe, so that you would do at least as good as what human parents don't even require all that sort of thing from their own children in order to love and care for them. But we are as well, just like Jews and Christians and Muslims. We're really just the same as them because we're a reincarnationist. We reject reincarnation. But we all love bacon, except for, well, I guess the Jews and Muslims don't like that. Some of them do maybe. Get this to work. There it goes. For us, if any gods are out there, they're extraterrestrials. That's how we would think of them, or other inhabitants of different dimensions or different continuums of time or space or something else we cannot, or only with some difficulty, understand, since we are ourselves evolved to make sense of the sort of reality that we experience. If there are no gods out there, and even if there are, but they're not the deities of traditional religions, then they're imaginative fictions, which, far from being meaningless, do teach us something about the mistakes of cognition that we are prone to, as well as about many subjective aspects of the human condition that are good, bad, and indifferent. As Clarence Darrow, his birthday was 1857, he died in 1938. He was the guy the lawyer that defended John Scopes in the famous Scopes monkey trial. And here's what he said: I don't believe in God because I don't believe in Mother Goose. And yet we can also say, I think with honesty, all of us, I believe in God in the same way that I believe in Mother Goose. Well, I don't know where Mother Goose ranked when Darrow made his comparison, but today Mother Goose is considered kind of a childish triviality, while God has not yet gotten into that status. Should, but not yet. Some conceptions of deities are probably better, though, than Mother Goose. Certainly they are better than the gods that were imagined in the Bronze Age. So we may, with more fairness, perhaps, we could say, I believe in God the same way that I believe in Batman, right? Isn't he an admirable character, fighting for the good fight? Or we could substitute Superman, Wonder Woman, James Bond, or any other serious and heroic fictional character. And aren't these characters meaningful? They sure do make a lot of money on them. They're not as profitable as God has been, but the point is that just because something isn't real doesn't mean that it isn't important, instructive, inspiring, meaningful, or valuable. Yet it certainly is also true that in order for such imaginative constructs or ideas to be any of these things, really, and not to be misunderstood to the point of dangerousness, they also have to be recognized and appreciated as being fiction. So this idea of deities is one that can be critically considered and thought about, not just believed or not believed. Every thought, including the imaginative thoughts that come out of human beings, tells us something. It teaches us something about ourselves as much or more than it informs us about the world outside of ourselves. There's this thing in the Bible, right? You all know it. Judge not, lest you be judged. And they usually interpret that as meaning, well, don't judge other people now because at the last day you're going to be judged. No, it means judge not, because when you judge, then other people know something about you and can judge you. That expresses the idea that the judgments we make allow others to form opinions and reach conclusions about the sort of people that we are. This is true of ideas about the natural world as much as it is true of speculations people have about the supernatural. But the supernatural, once a place of refuge for nonsense, once believed about the world outside of ourselves, the world that we all share, can now be appreciated by those who think, and hopefully we're such people, as simply the world of the imagination. I mean, as I said, there's nothing wrong with imagination, not even the imagination of Holy Scripture. But what is imagined must be compared with what anyone can perceive with their senses, or what we can build machines to detect for us. You know, this is the odd thing sometimes believers say, well, you believe in x-rays, even though you don't see those. Yes, well, we can build machines that can do that for us. We could build a machine that would see God and make pictures. That'd be great. I'm waiting. So this is true not just of deities and reincarnations, but also of ghosts, psychic powers, undefined energies that are just as dubious and for just the same reasons. I get in these discussions all the time with people about acupuncture, for example. So we can entertain and speculate all we want, but as the 18th century Scottish philosopher David Hume put it, and this is a wonderful quote, great thing to have in your library, if we reason a priori, and that means just without reference to any facts, like bachelors are all unmarried, because that's how you define bachelors, or math, that's a priori. If you reason that way, anything may appear able to produce anything. The falling of a pebble may, for all we know, extinguish the sun. You can think of how that might be the case. Or the wish of a man control the planets and their orbits. It is only experience which teaches us the nature and bounds of cause and effect and enable us to infer the existence of one object from that of another. So, here's our creed, or kind of what we aspire to. Agree or disagree, we put this up every church service. Maybe we should change it, but it's a pretty good boiled down expression. And we can express it differently whenever we like. If you have other ideas and how we might think of these summary statements, then email me and let's be innovative. We put the most, so we put the most emphasis, most effort into the monthly service. I know I do. We've had many really good December services, despite the fact that the subject of the holiday season, on which we tend to focus, can get old. But this is probably because the holiday is old. Welcome, latecomers. Don't grab a donut, though. Yeah.
Cookie.
A cookie.
I brought it for her.
Don't get brought those. I know. Anyways, I think we can all appreciate the difficulties as freethinkers that we have at this time of year, especially when the spotlight shines on people who claim that they have an exclusive right and ownership of Christmas. How many here would even say that they celebrate Christmas? Would you say that you celebrate Christmas? Okay.
I
Used to?
How about some Christmas gifts? Does that count?
Okay, well, sort of. See, a lot of it boils down to semantics.
Yes.
Are you an unbeliever, though?
Yes,
Okay, but you still celebrate Christmas?
give presents, but we don't talk about Santa.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
it's some participation,
Yeah.
right? And we were gonna go, I was gonna go to the parade of lights that Fort Worth had, and it didn't work out, but, you know, it's kind of a fun time of year. How many of us have a problem with the word Christmas? It doesn't have Jesus in it, you know? And coming up is Wednesday, that's Odin's Day, and there aren't any Norse people running around saying that if we call the days of the week by those terms, that we have to believe in Norse gods. But my brother told me that he just exclaimed the word Lord or Lordy, you know, kind of like Comey did on that hearing thing, Lordy. And that somebody you knew who knows he's an atheist said, see, you do believe in God. You said Lord. What? Say landlord, that means you believe in God.
I say Jesus Christ all the time.
Or, right, yeah, you bang your thumb with a hammer. Why would you do that anyway?
Oh, my God.
Right, exactly. And goodbye, you know, is a contraction of good, God be with you. That's just how it came about. So you don't really have a problem with the word Christmas? Okay. And how do you feel about the holiday and what goes on at this time of year? Because part of the reason we're having this service is because one of our members a few years back put on the evaluation form, because we sang carols and stuff, put on the evaluation form, it's a waste of time. How many say bah humbug? Okay, wow, that went a little bit then, okay. Well, I suggest in today's bulletin, pick a copy of it, you know, the ancient observance of the winter solstice may still serve a purpose, though less of a purpose than in ages past. How many here know of Center for Inquiry's Tom Flynn? He wrote this book in 1993 called The Trouble with Christmas. Flynn objects to Christmas being shoved down everybody's throats, that's how he puts it, and he argues that the Santa myth is especially bad for children. He styles himself the Anti-Claus. Flynn says that December 25th should be considered just another day of the week, and in fact, if it falls on Monday through Friday, he just goes to work and ignores it. So let me show you Tom Flynn.
So if you hadn't heard of that site, you learned something good today, something interesting.
Well, we had, weeks on the whole deal for Lila with the Christmas week.
Well, that's a good thing. And of
So the
course,
others could be friends, and I'll pick it.
and with what I do for a living, you know, we're essential personnel, everybody has to trade off, you know, Thanksgiving, but
Right.
Christmas or something like that.
And then they were always happy that I was there. Because that lived, you know, everybody else.
Oh, we missed the first part, let's back it up. This is Tom Flynn, this guy.
This has gone on far too long.
I agree.
That's his book. White sturdy.
Until we meet again.
That goes along. So that's Tom Flynn. That was him in action. Well, please let us know how we're doing and how we might do it better. Even better, help us do it better. And by the way, let me say right at the outset, we're not meeting here next month. The bulletin says so, and I'd anticipated we would, but I just heard from the guy at the hotel today that they're not gonna renew and have us be meeting here. So Edwin is gonna do a bunch of phone calling. Thank you so much in advance, Edwin, and we'll figure out where we're gonna meet. The next service, January 6th, but it's not gonna be here. And he didn't give a real good reason, so of course, we, as usual, we can speculate when we're badly treated as to maybe we're badly treated because we're not Christian or something like that, but who knows? I think this hotel just, maybe they're just not really set up to rent out meeting rooms. Welcome, you come to the Atheist Church, right?
Yes, if that's what you want to call it.
You didn't miss much, we're still in the introductory areas.
How
So
long have we been here?
we've been here for, I think this is the second year. Yeah, so there are like 3 or 4 other hotels in the area. Everyone's gonna start with them. You check out the old hotel. It used to be the Wilson World down on 183, I suppose, but if we stay in this area, it's gonna be easier to find, I suppose. But at any rate, so for 2019, we're not gonna be meeting here any longer. We also have a lot of other things that happen over the course of the month. Game night every Friday at the IHOP, that's at I-35 and Northwest Highway, right? Isn't that the right?
Yeah. You better go up West Highway.
Yeah. And also we have our salon. It's kind of an unstructured discussion, conversation over breakfast beginning at about 10 o'clock at the Embassy Suites on Bass Pro Drive, just a little ways northwest of here. The food goes away at 10:30. It's there for the hotel patrons, but you can go to the front desk and pay, and it's like, is it $15, $16?
16 with tax.
16. Yeah, they increase a little bit, but they have made-to-order omelets. It's a real good spread. Unfortunately, they don't have a lower price for just cereal, so the whole thing or nothing. But you can bring something too. It's not a restaurant. It's a big inner atrium area. So I've just brought my own food. You know, if you're not that hungry, bring your own. This is all on the back page of the bulletin, which if you lose yours, will be available on our website. You can always do more, but it takes people to do more and come up with the ideas. And what's most important, of course, is to put those ideas into action. And even if you just have an idea for a one-time event, we've had one-time events in the past, help us do something like that, and if it works great, then we can do it again and again. But we can do anything you would like to do, as long as we got people to do it and you're part of the picture. Put your free thinking into action and enjoy the rewards of helping in some way to push the world in a better direction. I'll try that again. Okay, that's the Tom Quinn guide. We always need volunteers to assist with child care Sunday school. We don't have any children here today, and that's the way it is often, but Kit, who's here, and Merlin trade off when there are kids. This is the service in the service of children, helping them to understand and get a grasp of how wonderful it is to be a free thinker. It's great that parents have some place to bring their kids where they see they'll be told the right thing, even though it's not for the parents, even though a lot of the rest of the world's telling them the wrong things. John Gauthier in the back is our videographer. Mike Zaft stood in last month, and I have the files that I'll get to you, John, for the video from last month. So there's always a lot to do. You are this church. Thank you so much, all of you today, for coming. But I encourage you to think of how you can make use of this church, your church, to do good things for yourself, for all of us, and for the future. And that's the subject of our next service, which will not be here, but future can be a little scary, you know? Promise, threat. Now, some people are afraid robots taking over the world. Somehow I have a good feeling they're not going to look like that, but be more like this, you know? If you're going to have robots take over, you don't want them looking all ugly and scary. Probably make them look like teddy bears or something. That would be a really successful way for robots to take over the world. Alfred North Whitehead, a 19th and 20th century British mathematician and philosopher, though, said, "The major advances in civilization are processes which all but wreck the societies in which they occur." Think about that, you know, somebody from 500 years ago were brought forward now, they would be, their minds would be boggled, and maybe they wouldn't even like our world so much. How many have read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World? Right? That's a kind of an example of that, right? So, and we're seeing major advances happening now. Does this mean that society as we know it will be wrecked as these advances transform everything about how we live? How will biotech, we just heard about the Chinese researchers saying that he had edited the genes of these twin babies just born recently. How's that going to play out? What will become of the impressive efforts to create artificial intelligence? You know, Elon Musk, who's the guy with SpaceX and Tesla, you know, he's been warning about AI, its potential danger. And of course, Stephen Hawking, before he died, also was quite concerned about that. Whitehead also said this: "Civilization advances by extending the number of important operations which we can perform without thinking about them." You know, that kind of goes along with the idea of dropping 20 people on a desert island and asking, can they recreate civilization? And since most of them came out of a civilization that use all these things they don't know how they work and don't really think about them, probably not, unless they were all engineers. Will people be able to stop thinking altogether and let machines do it for them? And what then? So you definitely should be here for the January 2019 service. I mean here at the service, not at this location. So watch the website. Make sure you're on our email mailing list. If you're not on there, go to the website. There's a place to fill in your email address and get added on there. How many got the e-newsletter yesterday? Went out about 2 a.m. Okay, so if you're getting that, we'll send out a notice that way as soon as we know where we're going to be meeting. So next we have Moment of Science. The latest NASA space probe to Mars landed successfully this past Monday. How many remember when it launched? Sometimes they launch like a year ahead of time. It launched only in May, so it got there pretty quick. It was supposed to launch 2 years earlier, but they missed the window because of problems they were having with the seismometer. Yes, this space probe is, the idea is to explore the interior of Mars using seismic investigations, geodesy, and heat transport. That's how they've been spelled. InSight. A pair of identical cube satellites accompanied InSight for a Mars flyby mission. Many of these little miniaturized satellites already orbit the Earth. These are the first that are sent into deep space and also relay telemetry from InSight back to Earth. And here's a cool picture. As it neared Mars, turned around and took a picture. From near Mars, this is the Earth. And this barely visible speck is the moon. And this is just, as it says, a shadow of the antenna and the high gain antenna, a little corner of the thermal blanket. So it's a camera shooting out. Is that cool or what? So, and next I want to put up a video produced by the New York Times. And yes, I'll warn you ahead of time, there's a totally unnecessary religious reference, but the rest of it's pretty good, so.
Hey, go back to that picture real quick there.
Yeah.
What's that reference at the top? Wall-E? The
Oh,
Disney
Mark
film?
R.O.B.
Wall-E
yeah,
is,
right, I don't know. I saw that too.
it's a little humorous reference there.
Or it might be that the Wall-E movie was actually picking on some.
They use fire extinguisher fluid to judge.
Was it one? There's been interplay, of course. Like the shuttle Enterprise was named that because of Star Trek.
Yeah, if you see the Wall-E movie, it sort of makes sense.
The hardest part of getting to Mars is sticking the landing. On the 26th of November, 2018, NASA's InSight spacecraft will plunge into the thin Martian atmosphere at over 14,000 miles an hour. An alien fireball over the red plains. InSight will pop a supersonic parachute, drop its heat shield, and prepare to touch down. In the past, Martian rovers have bounced and rolled to a stop inside huge airbags, or floated to the surface hanging from an elaborate sky crane. But InSight will touch down on rockets, just the way God intended, in the words of the mission's lead scientist. If all goes well, and it arrives in one piece, the lander will unfurl its solar panels and get to work. InSight won't send back any dramatic images. Its mission is to look down into the geological heart of the planet. A seismometer will listen for vibrations and rumbles, Mars quakes, and meteorite impacts. This detector is so sensitive, it can sense movements smaller than the width of an atom, or feel the faint tidal groundswell from the gravity of the tiny moon Phobos. The second device, with a pointed spike, will hammer itself 15 feet into the ground to measure heat flowing up from the planet's core. Mars today is a craggy, frigid desert, but once it was wet and warm. What InSight learns could give us hints about the structure of other rocky planets. Scarred Mercury, clouded Venus, and our own dynamic Earth, which is too large and too active to have kept the traces of its early formation. And perhaps it will even tell us about the billions of rocky worlds orbiting other stars. Over the past 2 decades, 3 generations of rovers have toured Mars. They have scraped and poked, scooped and sampled, dusted and drilled into Mars' surface. InSight will stay in one place, but dig deeper and listen longer. It may provide clues to why Mars was once habitable, why and how it changed, and what that might mean for Earth. For our old sibling Mars, Earth represents the road not taken, the road to life, blue water, and green mountains. Home to a species now curious enough to send machines to investigate and interrogate nature's choices. To understand how we got lucky with a garden world.
There's a lot about this, you could really just go on and on. There are some hour-long, I think maybe even 2-hour-long videos on YouTube about the mission. For one thing, when they got there, it was relaying telemetry from Mars Odyssey, which is in orbit, it's been in orbit around Mars, I think, since 2001. That's the longest functioning probe around Mars. They didn't think it was going to even last that long. So that's nice that we're really getting more bang for our buck out of the money we're spending on it.
The U.S. is the only successful.
Yes, and a lot of failed landings by us and especially other countries. It's not an easy thing to do. And You know, at night, you can find Mars in the sky, and just think about blasting off a rocket, getting there. What an amazing thing. Probably the people who do it, I'm sure they think, just like things I do, cut babies out of people and all. It seems like a very complex thing, but when you know how to do it, it's simple. But it's not so simple, not unless you know exactly what you're doing. So, the futility of Christmas. Can't complain that to me, this is maybe a little bit of a downer type of subject. You know, who wants to go and hear about what a useless thing Christmas is, because Christmas is fun and we do like the lights and we're like anybody else, we like Christmas that way. But on the other hand, you look at all the things we put ourselves through. Bulletin today talks a little bit about that. Also, you see, I've been thinking for some time about this, about Albert Camus' essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. Who has ever heard of that? Or who has ever heard of the myth of Sisyphus? Have you read the essay? Have you read Albert Camus? Okay, so this has got to go on your list. So when thinking about the December service, I realized when we considered the winter holiday season, I thought that you might be combined, especially since a few years back we had carol singing, and one of the feedback items was, what a waste of time, which got me thinking, well, is Christmas really, is there a point and purpose to it? There are people that run around saying it's our religious holiday, nobody else has any claim to it, etc. Then I stumbled across the image on the left here of Santa pushing that big sack of gifts up the sloped roof, right? That's exactly the myth of Sisyphus. And so I decided we got to do the service. So who is Sisyphus? From mythweb.com, that's an interesting place, I didn't even know that existed before. Sisyphus was founder and king of Corinth. Remember the letter to the Corinthians? So the town of Corinth, or Ephyra as it was called in those days. He was notorious as the most cunning knave on earth. His greatest triumph came at the end of his life, when the god Hades came to claim him personally for the kingdom of the dead. Hades had brought along a pair of handcuffs, a comparative novelty, and Sisyphus expressed such an interest that Hades was persuaded to demonstrate their use. You can just imagine how the story would go, as the poets would say, where Sisyphus said, oh, that's really cool. I bet that couldn't hold a god, though. Hades was persuaded to demonstrate their use on himself. And so it came about that the High Lord of the Underworld was kept locked up in a closet at Sisyphus' house for many a day, a circumstance which put the great chain of beings seriously out of whack, because nobody could die. A soldier might be chopped to bits in battle and still show up at camp for dinner. There's a movie, right? Death Takes a Holiday? Same theme. Funny how these things get recycled. Finally, Hades was released, and Sisyphus was ordered summarily to report to the underworld for his eternal assignment. But the wily one had another trick up his sleeve. He simply told his wife not to bury him, and then complained to Persephone, queen of the dead, that he had not been accorded the proper funeral honors. And he had no business being there on the far side of the river Styx, because his wife hadn't placed a coin under his tongue to secure to pay the ferryman, Charon, the ferryman. Surely her highness could see that Sisyphus must be given leave to journey back topside and put things right, and she assented, and Sisyphus made his way back to the sunshine, where he promptly forgot all about funerals and such drab affairs and lived on in anticipation for another good stretch of time. But even this paramount trickster could only postpone the inevitable. Eventually, he was hauled down to Hades, where his indiscretions caught up with him. For a crime against the gods, the specifics of which are variously reported, he was condemned to an eternity at hard labor, and frustrating labor at that, for his assignment was, as you may guess from the picture that I put up earlier, to roll a great boulder up to the top of a mountain. Only every time Sisyphus, by the greatest exertion and toil, finally got up to the summit, the thing rolled back down again. And so Sisyphus came to be the patron saint, as it were. I know the saint business comes from Catholicism, but really I think it's so much genericized we can use it in a figurative and metaphorical sense, kind of like every copy off of copy machine is a Xerox, that sort of thing. So he's the patron saint, as it were, of futility, of pointless and useless effort, of toil and exertion that comes to nothing. But this notion of futility is a very interesting one if you think about it. For Camus, philosophers, but for Camus writing this, The Myth of Sisyphus, and discussing that essay, philosophers really haven't concerned themselves much with him. Perhaps this is because before God died, it was simply assumed that everything was going to be sorted out in an afterlife, that all of this existence was for a purpose. Now it seems that death is itself the final sorting out. And of course, that's about the time that existentialism came along as a way of addressing that problem. But even a key figure in existentialism, the famous French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, sets one of his best-known works, his play, Final Exit, in an afterlife, where he has three people in a room who have to annoy each other for eternity, and during the course of this, one of the characters even says, "Hell is other people." How many have heard that? Interestingly enough, this has to do with what we were saying earlier about judge not lest you be judged, because what Sartre meant by it was that hell is other people because the other people in your life get to know you, and then you have to live within the confines of their estimates of you. And I think we've all gone through life, that wherever we are, man, woman, heavy, light, whatever, getting judged by other people based on what they perceive of you. Now, if you go looking for scholarly academic treatments of futility, you mostly find discussions of medical futility, of how and when it can be decided not to try to treat serious disease. And in Texas and in other states, they even have laws against futile treatments when you're in the ICU, especially near the end of life. Interestingly enough, even then, it's a contentious subject, even in the academic literature. And of course, remember death panels? That's what that was all about. You also find, when you look up futility, this book, which is a novel that amazingly predicted the sinking of the Titanic. Now, why this novel was called Futility, I've not been able to discover, but if you look for a book about futility, that's what you come up with. Well, Albert Camus took up the subject of futility. He was preoccupied with what he considered the absurdity of life. He was born in 1913, died in 1960. He was a French philosopher, journalist, and author. He was one of these French people that was born in Algeria when it was a French colony. During World War II, he was a member of the resistance during the Nazi occupation of France. And importantly, he was an atheist. Although he denied he was an atheist while affirming that he did not believe in God. So his views on religion were complex, maybe kind of like I was talking about earlier, where you believe in God in the same way you believe in Captain Kirk. And while also he was considered to be an existentialist, Camus denied that too, and he denied even being a philosopher. His works, The Plague, The Rebel, and The Stranger, very much worth reading. I remember puzzling over them when I read them many years ago as a young man. They haunt your thoughts, or at least they did mine. But if you only read one thing by Camus, you have to read this Myth of Sisyphus. The titular character is, of course, a stand-in for humanity, for each one of us who toil to accomplish something in our lives, but must in the end die and be forgotten. And yet we still seem to live as if we are unaware that all we are and all that we do will come to nothing, or worse. This is a conundrum far more troubling than whether some extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional power created the universe or life on Earth. I mean, what does that really matter? It is a question that is far more urgent than whether somehow apparent death is really passage to another life. You'll find out when you get there. For Camus, it is really the only important question as he begins the myth of Sisyphus by saying, can you read that from up there? From back there? How about now? All this good food, but in the end it all turns to crack. And of course, nothing could be more fuel than prayer. So here's how Camus starts out. There's but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. It is such a central question, I think, especially for us atheists. And in fact, the myth of Sisyphus has been called one of the most penetrating and heartfelt kind of expressions of the atheist spirit. If you have not read it, you really owe yourself to read it. It is not one of these, God can't exist, God is stupid. It's one of these, what does reality mean for us? Totally, this gets way beyond what other people say religion is. And in fact, Kant, who was the French guy who was involved with the encyclopedists and stuff back in the 18th century, he even said, if you're going to destroy something, you have to replace it first. That's what we need to think about doing. But really, are there any other animals that kill themselves? Camus observed that Galileo declined to die for his ideas. And Voltaire, of course, famously said, I'm very fond of the truth, but not at all of martyrdom. But people who kill themselves do so because they come to feel that life is not worth living. And yet, Camus also observed, I see others paradoxically getting killed for the ideas or illusions that give them a reason for living. What is called a reason for living is also an excellent reason for dying. I therefore conclude that the meaning of life is the most urgent of questions. And he goes on to consider many related ideas, very good stuff, before coming to consider Sisyphus. And Camus calls him the absurd hero, as his scorn of the gods, his hatred of death, and his passion for life won him that unspeakable penalty in which the whole being is exerted toward accomplishing nothing. And yet, Sisyphus is superior to his fate. He is stronger than his rock. If this myth is tragic, that is because its hero is conscious. Where would his torture be, indeed, if at every step the hope of succeeding upheld him? And that's an important point, right? Suicide gets rid of your consciousness, so now there's not even absurd, you haven't overcome it. The tragedy only exists when you're conscious. The workman of today works every day of his life at the same tasks, and his fate is no less absurd. But it is tragic only at the rare moments when it becomes conscious. Sisyphus, proletarian of the gods, powerless and rebellious, knows the whole extent of his wretched condition. The lucidity that was to constitute his torture at the same time crowns his victory. There is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn. That's a very important sentence, I think. So this is Camus' answer to the problem of the absurd, and he concludes by saying, one always finds one's burden again, but Sisyphus teaches the higher fidelity that negates the gods and raises rocks. This universe henceforth without a master seems to him neither sterile nor futile. Each atom of that stone, each mineral flake of that night-filled mountain in itself forms a world. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. His final sentence. So, how does futility go with Christmas? How do we put that together? Well, is Christmas intimately, ultimately pointless or not? What is it supposed to accomplish? And we may think of it in the context of what all holidays and rituals may be supposed to accomplish. In the case of Christmas, it may be a limited point to be sure. I talked about this in the bulletin. It may be more limited than it used to be because things are different now than when our ancestors first looked up at the sky and realized that there was a correlation between the positions and movements of the planets and stars and the seasons that they experienced. But Christmas still serves, well, when it's not being actively discouraged from serving, to knit people together in a common cause. Even if that cause is simply turning our attentions and getting through each day to enjoying the lights, special music that we don't want to hear in July. That's a whole other subject. And also, of course, socializing that we do through eating and drinking and brazen materialism. Even a condemned person gets a last meal. Why is that? So when we enjoyed Christmas this year, Mythmas, and even when we put up with all the necessary annoyances of the winter holidays, the traffic jams, the trudging through shopping malls and airports, the lost luggage and standing in lines to return gifts, what a ritual that is, right? Because it's the wrong size or you just would rather have something different. And eventually hauling the wrapping paper and the dead trees to the curb, it's all in the way of rebelling against the inevitable end of this year and the beginning of the next, at the end of which, next year, we'll be doing it all again. More generally, in everything that we do, despite its futility, no, because of its futility, we are scorning the limited and transient nature of our existence, which is the absurdity of life. By the way, how many here have come across this trope of believers challenging unbelievers with something like this? You know, they say, well, if you don't believe in God or in heaven or hell, or you don't believe that your life ultimately matters, that the whole human species is eventually going to become extinct and the universe dissipated into nothingness, well, why don't you just kill yourself? How many have heard that? Rory's heard it. Here it is on the internet. Just pull it off. Came up on Google Images. Well, the next time you might consider thinking, if not responding, if you're personally so confronted, here's your answer. Because I enjoy spitting in the face of certain doom. And that's what Camus was about too. He said, revolt, rebel. The absurdity of life is not something you just accept. And the dirty little secret is that even believers do it. They shake their fists at any deities there may be when they live as we do, as if they were non-believers who do not fear being punished in the next life for any pleasures we take in this one, and this one life, of course, being the only one that we know. So please think about that. Anybody have any comments? What do you think? Is that the way to respond to futility? Does that make it a waste of time? How are we doing on time anyway?
Plenty.
So we've got some time for discussion and questions. I also had a couple of other things I was just going to bring up. Well, first of all, let's just run through the most important slides of the whole thing. There's, I think, a little fewer of us here than last time. Say, well, I'll have to put twice as much money in checks and things in the rainbow boxes in the back because we do need to pay our bills. And we don't know what our bills are going to be in 2019. I think, apartment rents and things like that have all gone up, so I would not be at all surprised if we have to pay more for meeting rooms in 2019, but we'll see. We're gonna do our best, that means finish up.
Turn lights back.
What's that?
Turn lights.
Yep. Reasons to give us your money, but there's really only one big reason, and that is we can do together so much more and have so much more fun when we're doing it together, just like Christmas. You can put lights up and have a Christmas tree in your home anytime you want, but it's so much more fun when everybody's doing it, when people are doing it cooperatively. Because we have shared values, and that's the kind of thing that builds trust. It's pro-social, it's social glue. So this is our grassroots effort at that. So help us promote your values and demonstrate your commitment by being the future that you wish to see. So next, I put down here at the Comfort Inn, but it's not going to be, I don't know if you can read it back there, but I found this quote by Milton Berle: "For our next service, yield the future, whether it's a promise or a threat." He actually said this, I guess, to a graduating class. He says, nowadays, when the speaker tells the graduates that the future is theirs, is that a promise or a threat? Think about it. Like, here, you can have it, we're done. It's a mess, but you have to deal with it. A couple of other things I had, though. How many have seen or heard of these upside-down Christmas trees? You seen them? Yeah. Supposedly they save space, and the merchants in the stores will put these Christmas trees hanging from the ceiling. And apparently this started in Eastern Europe. I don't know who or why it started, but the argument is that the ornaments and things you put on the tree are more at eye level. It clears up space on the floor. You can put your gifts down there. Apparently it's all the rage, and some places have been selling these and the things to hang them up with, and they sell out.
And it puts the presents out of,
You can take a real tree and hang it upside down.
How do you water it?
and it puts the presents out of reach until
I guess you can put a wet
Christmas
sponge
morning.
at the top, huh?
It puts the presents out of reach until Christmas morning.
Oh, that's a thought. The other thing is, where do you put the star? Well, here they put the star up, they just put it again on top. Or if you're, for people that put an angel. Of course, I'm surprised the Christians haven't come up and said, upside down Christmas tree, that's sacrilegious. The other thing is, 12 Days of Christmas. We all know that song and that rhyme and so forth. Did you realize, if you do your math quickly, that if you add up all the gifts that are given on all 12 days, remember it goes up and up and up, it comes up to 364 gifts, which is one for every day of the year, and then Christmas. The other thing is that the gifts that go along with the 12 days of Christmas correspond apparently to the months, and people would spend time thinking about how each day corresponds to a month, and people would study what was happening to determine like what the weather is going to be and predict the future. So that's kind of weird. Lastly, I think it was in 1979, it was sometime in the 1970s, that some guy wrote an essay or paper saying 12 Days of Christmas was Catholics' way of teaching their kids catechism, because it all has to do with the Christian faith, and they had to keep their faith secret because that was during the time in Britain when Catholicism was all alive. Except, it holds no water, because all the things supposedly the catechism taught are common to all Christianity, so they wouldn't have to get code or keep anything secret, nothing unique to Catholicism. So, that was just a couple of additional things I had. I wasn't sure where to fit them in, so we'll just go back.
Hey, Tim, why don't they call it the 12 Days of Fibonacci?
There you go.
Some of the number of presents is this Fibonacci series.
Is that correct?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Neat. So mathematics, we can do another service in the future then on Christmas math. So, what other comments do people have? What's everybody gonna do for Christmas? Do you have a tree? How many people, let's just do a little informal, how many people are gonna have a tree up? Yeah, probably will, okay. Of course, if you don't have kids, it's not, there's not the pressure. How many put lights up outside the house? Okay,
We just go on a cruise every Christmas.
just go on a cruise every Christmas, let them do it.
That's right.
That's always a fun thing too, you know, the municipalities all put up all their banners, and in a way, it's kind of like, why am I, my taxpayers, going to celebrate this religious holiday? But if it's not a religious holiday, and as I say in the bulletin, you know, if this is gonna work, then Christmas has to get as little religious meaning as Wednesday does to refer to the fourth day of the week. So we're headed, and I think we are headed in that direction. Let's hope we get there quicker. Anybody else with comments?
Well, my comment
Yes.
is thinking back to Joseph Campbell, and
Yes.
as far as the myth of Christmas and so forth, he says that myths are very important for human survival. And so I suppose that it's a good thing if we can look upon it as a time to celebrate together and do good things. And so each myth that we have within our past help us carry on traditions and so on and so forth. So it's so important.
Absolutely, it's part of culture, and of course, the guy's name is Joseph Campbell. He's someone that I think most freethinkers would be very interested in. If you've never looked at his book, you know, The Hero with a Thousand Faces and so forth. And he said, and I remember this is a very profound thing, myths are public dreams, and dreams are private myths, right? What do you think about that? You know, what do you dream? And, yeah, there's a scientific explanation, but its meaning to you, you cannot determine that by science. This is what religion is about. It doesn't mean you think, oh, there's really a world that I went to in my dreams, but dreams mean something, or you can make them mean something. You think about what they mean. Yes, Robert?
Going along with what Deanna said, as a psychologist I talked to quite a bit, he said we live by our stories, and they don't have to be true. They don't have to be, they can be myths, like Deanna said. We live by our stories.
Right, yeah, we're storytelling animals. Will Smith, when he's been here, has made that point many times, and he's read some of those stories that are interesting to think about. And of course, what do we hear talked about now that never really used to be talked about in the past, and that is the narrative. You know what I'm talking about? There's a certain narrative, and then people fight over what the narrative is. You know, this politician is a dirty crook, or a wonderful, hardworking patriot. Second Amendment is a great thing, or guns are terrible, nobody should have one. And then it gets to be kind of a whole struggle over who controls the narrative. And that's kind of what the so-called war on Christmas they talk about is. And I hope the side of reason wins, that it's just a holiday, everybody should enjoy it. And the social glue, that's what helps us trust each other. We'll talk next month also about what it means to maybe to be living in the surveillance state, which we certainly seem to be headed towards. You know, here Ed Snowden came out and thought he made a big splash, and it was a very temporary, minor splash, and now he's gone back home yawning, and he's ruined his life. One wonders what will ultimately become of him. How many think Trump should pardon Ed Snowden? Yeah, I think so. No, you don't think so? Okay. Well, we should have a presentation about that, where we stand with Ed Snowden. Yes?
I think we're all missing the point.
What is the point, Edwin?
Our whole society currently is questioning myths. Are you not aware what's happening this year with the myth of the Confederate soldier? And how our communities, the people are not just criticizing them, but tearing them down. That's a myth of the Confederate soldier, the great cause, right?
Why is it
There's a myth of Thanksgiving. Are you not aware that all the Indians, is this working?
Yeah.
There's all the Indians are saying this is a myth. This is a myth. You know, we're not celebrating this. I mean, you wipe this out. You know, there were millions of us within, 100 years. 3/4 of us were dead. You know, and that could be changing, and you're not aware of that? There are a lot of myths that are, right now, our whole society is changing our thinking. But look at the myths of what's happening with women. What is happening with women? They're saying, wait a minute, don't treat us like vassals or whores or sluts or, and not talk about it. You know, what's happened the last 2-3 years? The Me Too movement. Now, there's some anti-Me Too movement going on too. But I mean, what's happening? That's a myth that they're fighting, and we're changing. Our whole society is totally changing the myths. There's nothing wrong with myths as long as you understand that they're simply stories that may or may not be true, or it's the best understanding that we have of the truth. But as we get smarter, wiser, with wisdom, you know, we should say, wait a minute, that's not true, that's not right. But, you know, what about Christmas? What is wrong? Go back to what people used to do, non-Christians. They used to celebrate what? I mean, they used to give to each other. Well, why tell your children Santa Claus is coming and the presents are from Santa Claus? They're not from Santa Claus, they're from mom and dad and your friends. Why not talk about a holiday where people love each other, a personal, social thing, not some myth, some God in the sky, and that's what Santa Claus is, he's a God. Omniscient, all-powerful, why play this game with children? You know, you give it from, we're your parents, we love you, we're giving your gifts because we had a good year. Why not do the same thing with society, with the rest of society? You know, let's celebrate a good year. You know, and let's look forward to the new year. I mean, bring it down to earth.
And Ken Lewis wrote that. I think there's a book somebody wrote about, you know, what you think you know about American history isn't necessarily correct.
It's a Howard Zinn, I think.
Yeah.
Anybody familiar with Howard Zinn books? But that's true about Thanksgiving. You know, the pilgrims, when they arrived, I think they stopped off at Cape Cod or one of these little islands along the way. And they wrote down and recorded, they went ashore and they found corn growing, so they just helped themselves.
Well, yeah, that's.
Well, what kind of a, nice way to show up and just help yourself to what other people have been doing.
Well, a lot of times history is somewhat altered to make it, of course, more appealing. You talk about myths and challenging myths, and that's why I enjoy reading books like this. One example they give is Paul Revere. There are a lot of myths about the ride of Paul Revere. For one thing, he almost certainly did not say the British are coming, because all subjects of the colonies considered themselves British at that point in time. They wouldn't have said the British are coming, they might have said the Redcoats are coming.
Right.
But they would not have said the British are coming. We're the British. At that time, they still considered themselves British subjects. So kind of interesting reading stuff about that.
Yeah, I think it is interesting, and this plays into a lot of other common themes that should be more widespread. You know, that there's good and bad in everything. Just because you like something doesn't mean you've got to forget all the bad things. You know, there were bad things that happened when the United States became colonized, and during the early centuries, slavery and all sorts of nasty things. And there's a whole story behind that too. So there's good and bad to everything, and it's probably just better to kind of understand that. But it's kind of hard to tell a story that leans, that wends its way through all the good and bad without really making people think. And people don't want to think. Remember, the advances of civilization are to be able to build these structures up, including the stories that we tell, so that you don't really have to think too much. It's just rote. Maybe our brains are just not capable. That's what, if we're going to do some genetic engineering, it should be that we can have brains can multitask better. Yes?
Well, I want to respond to Edwin just a little bit.
Go ahead.
I think
She's
you're
a woman, she got to listen.
I think you're so right about the myths that harm us, like history and so on and so forth. But heavens, I think that as a child, it's going to ruin the whole thing if you say, well, mom and dad are going to be putting some gifts underneath the tree for you to come and get. It's more fun to have that imagination thing of Santa and looking forward to Santa, or the Easter Bunny, or the fairy that comes and puts a quarter underneath your pillow when you lose a tooth. And And, they eventually know, oh, this is not true. But in growing up, it enlarges their fantasy world of magic. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's fun.
Well, having raised 5 kids from babies, I will also say that there's a certain age where they really can't distinguish fact from fantasy, and you shouldn't even try. I remember on one occasion, one of my kids was there, and somebody was saying, "Oh, Santa's bad for kids." And I said, "Well, yeah, here's a kid. Hey, Genevieve, Santa's pretend, right?" She goes, "Yeah, he's gonna come down the chimney right there. He's gonna bring me presents, blah, blah, blah." You're just knocking your head against the wall to try to explain it to kids. They've got to learn on their own pace. Plus which, there is the additional benefit, I think. The social side, the psychologists should get this figured out, the good things and the bad things, which outweighs the other, as with so many other things in life that you have to decide for kids. Kids also start reality testing. One of our kids lost a tooth and put it under a pillow, didn't tell mom and dad. The next morning, it was still there. Puts it under the pillow the next night, doesn't tell mom and dad. Next morning, it's still there. Now she goes and tells mom, "Look, I lost a tooth. I'm going to put it under my pillow." Next morning, coin is there. That's how science starts, right?
Yeah.
Testing reality. You want to see what's fact and what's fiction. So, yeah, good and bad to everything, but that's what we're here to talk about and explore. We don't want to have just one story. There's not just one creed. There's not just one dogma. It's all subject to question. We can even ask this heretical question. Maybe Christmas is all a pile of crap. Certainly that's what all the food turns into, but on the other hand, there's fun parts of it as well. Anybody else have any? I've had the advantage of being able to think about this stuff for the whole month.
She went to.
Yes, I know, I'm coming back here.
About telling your kids that there's a Santa Claus. I have a 2 and a 3-year-old, and I've never told them that there's a Santa Claus. Just because eventually they will find out.
They soak it up.
Yeah, and then it'll be like, "Well, Mom, why did you lie?" And I think the world is pretty magic on its own without having to tell your kids about some weird Batman that comes down your chimney once a year to give you presents. And I think telling them that you give them the presents is a way to get them to appreciate the things that you do for them.
But they eventually.
Yeah, they eventually figured it out, but, my kids' grandparents tell them that there's a Santa Claus. When they ask me, I say, I don't really believe in Santa Claus, but.
And what I used to tell them is just, that's what they say. And I remember one of my kids brought me an atlas with a map showing the North Pole. It's all water, right? Where's the island that Santa's workshop is at? Doesn't Santa Claus live at the North Pole? Well, what am I going to say? I just said, that's what they say. That's what I was always told. There's lots of things you can do without lying because they're going to soak it up all from the popular culture. And then the child themselves, they say, well, maybe it's an island that's just too small to show on the map. Right? But it's really fun when the kids start testing reality and coming up with these different theories. The sad part is when they go and tell their siblings and spoil it all because it's really fun to kind of figure it out for yourself. And I tried to do that when the kid figured it out. I say, okay, you figured it out. Now you're like a grown-up. You're in a secret. Don't tell all little people that they've got to figure it out for themselves. So
Santa Claus came under Christmas, is a bunch of baloney anyhow, because Constantine came up with that date.
right.
And it 326 years for it to happen.
Yeah, a lot of these traditions. Well, like upside down Christmas trees, that's only, I think from the 1700s or something, they started doing that in Eastern Europe. Wait a few hundred years, everybody's going to do that because it makes a lot more sense to hang a tree from the ceiling than put it on the floor. You never even thought of it. So.
You remember his name, the British guy, Canadian?
Right.
He was talking about his memories, about how he realized that this thing was alive, or the God and everything was alive. Because him and his brother was talking, and he said something about Santa Claus or God, and his big brother said, ah, and his mother immediately said, shut up. And he knew right away.
Knew something
there was a lie there.
Knew something was up. I thought you were going to interject and say, yes, and Santa Claus was Turkish. He was a Turkish bishop, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was born in Patara, Mira.
Yeah. so nobody was from Turkey, she can claim that, you know, all
Well,
civilization started.
He was born there and he was giving gifts to kids and everything, and they became Santa Claus. It was San Nicholas.
Right, Saint Nicholas,
Saint
just
Nicholas.
say Saint Nicholas really fast, Saint Nicholas and Santa Claus. That's where it comes from.
So this is, you know, kids are that smart, they pick on all those small hints. Because the big brother tried to say something and the mother immediately said, shut up. And he said, okay, there's something there they don't want me to know. What is it?
And we just, and that's what we need to encourage. That's what we want to encourage, especially in adults. So, you know, when I think of that part of the New Testament where Christ says you must become like little children, yeah, you have to start questioning things. You have to realize how ignorant you are and that there's so many things you need to learn. And don't just swallow everything that everybody tells you. So.
Tim, I can remember when I was a kid, my grandfather who grew up Lutheran, and he did not want anything about Santa Claus, because he said if we tell a child that there is a Santa Claus, they find out that to be a lie, then later they're going to doubt that Jesus Christ is, that they would think that that was a lie because you lied to them about Santa Claus. So that was the primary reason for his bah humbug.
We had a debate many years ago, maybe we should restage it. We even got a little blip, a little blurb in the Dallas Morning News that picked it up because we sent out a press release, a debate on the existence of Santa Claus, and we had, you know, two people giving the arguments. And afterwards, I remember several people coming up and saying, you know, a lot of those arguments are very much like the arguments about the existence of God. And of course, I'm thinking, duh, that was the point.
They picked up on it.
Yeah. So let's all adjourn and go to Jason's after you empty out your pockets. Well, maybe save just enough to pay for your salad at Jason's. But remember to feed the rainbow colored boxes. Watch your email. If nothing shows up, you know, you can always, the telephone number's on the back of the bullet. If you call me up, I'm not going to get mad and say, oh, what are you calling me? I'll tell you where we're going to meet. But we'll have to figure that out in the next week or two, hopefully, so we can continue on as we have, doing what we do, which, as far as I know, nobody else in town and very few places otherwise, elsewhere in the country do it. Anyone else with a comment, question? All right, well, I hope to see all of you, or at least many of you, at Jason's afterwards. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. That's really
Nice meeting you, Dennis.
Pleasure.